Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn. With me today, I have Helena Bouchez, Jonathan Gaev, and Eric Smith. And I want to ask the question, how do you seek out information that goes against what you think so you might change your mind? Eric, I would love for you to kick us off.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important pieces of this is to make sure you're getting as many different perspectives as possible. We're kind of going through these motions. We think that we know everything. We think that we have all the information that's been presented, but it's very important for us to be able to look on the other side of things and be able to gather as much information on that side as well. Different perspectives, whether that's in your relationship life, your business life, whatever it is, you want to be able to see from both angles, be able to understand, combine both those different perspectives and come to your own conclusion about what's right and what's wrong. Mm-hmm. I think there were a lot of times people get stuck in a silo of believing what they think is right is because they don't get any other opposite thoughts about what is going on. And a lot of times they're continuing to go down the same path and surrounding themselves with people who think about things the same way that they do. But when you start looking on the other side of the street and getting different perspectives, it opens up your mind just a bit.
For me, when I hear a different perspective about let's say a controversial topic, could be gun control, abortion, something like that, I try to tell myself, look, the person who has that argument is a logical person and I'll assume came to their opinion logically. So then I challenge myself, okay, what would I have to believe in order to come to that person's conclusion? And then I look at that argument and then I see if that persuades me at all. So that's one of the things that I do. I have some other tricks, but I want to give time to everyone.
That's an interesting engineer perspective. Helena, what do you do?
I kind of operate from the philosophy that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So my mind is always open. When I hear something that kind of challenges my existing belief, my impulse is to dig deeper and say, tell me more about that so that I can get a sense of what their thinking is and kind of where they're coming from. I was involved in politics a lot when I was in New Jersey, and a book that was really helpful to me was Don't Think of an Elephant by a guy named George Lakoff. And he's a linguist he's a retired linguist from California. And he talks about frameworks and language in terms of frameworks. And if you can understand the framework of where a person's coming from, it's super humanizing. And it allows you more easily to step into their shoes rather than kind of like walling them off and just making them a two-dimensional object.
I know for me, I've tried really hard to start noticing when I hear something that's different from what I think, and I immediately have that, nope, I don't believe that reaction, like noticing that reaction and catching it and saying, okay. And that's not to say every time I hear something that I disagree with, that changes my mind. It doesn't always, but I try to give it the opportunity, the moment to say, okay, let me hear this out before I just shut it down.
Oh, that's interesting, Dr. Robyn. I do something like that too. When I notice myself kind of digging in and taking a strong position, if I'm aware enough, I say to myself, well, Jonathan, why do you actually have this opinion that you have? And I also try to distinguish between facts and inference. So there are some things where facts are not relevant. People's taste, which beer they like, which scotch they like, that's not a factually based thing. But some other things, is COVID contagious? That's somewhat factually based concept. And so then I try to look at whatever source it is. So all sources have a bias. I certainly learned that a long time ago. And I try to separate the facts that are in the source from the inference. So there could be sources I don't agree with. There could be conclusions I don't agree with, but perhaps the facts they're quoting are things that I can use and work with myself.
Eric, I'd love to come back to you. What are your thoughts now?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said about taking a pause. When someone presents an idea to you or a belief to you, you're taking a pause to be able to, even if you disagree with it, you're taking a pause to be able to say to yourself, well, wait a minute, let me kind of hear this out the whole way. Let me fully understand where they're coming from. And to other points, like separating out the fact from the fiction, right? It's like some things are set in stone in fact, and your beliefs might not be in fact. And you have to be able to navigate that the best way and be able to take as much in from your surroundings to be able to come to the right conclusion that's going to point you in the right direction.
Well, and that's interesting because that makes me ask the question, well, what constitutes a fact? Because I grew up in a very fundamental Christian family, and there are certain things that they consider fact that at this point I'm like, no, that's faith, that's a belief, and I'm not having a problem with you believing it, but don't tell me it's a fact. So I think that that's a slippery slope of, well, what is a fact? What does that mean?
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes that's hard to navigate. Sometimes things are set in stone, and then sometimes it's a little bit more fluid. And when it's a little bit more fluid, I think that it's important to get more perspectives and more thought behind it so you can come to the right conclusion.
I think a lot of times, we have so much coming at us with the different medias and whatnot. And I think a lot of times you were only getting 25% of really what's happening. When you learn history in school, you're only getting one sliver through one, the teacher's perspective. To me, like, what is the trigger to say, oh, I may not be as educated on this topic as I thought I was, and who do you seek out to start to fill in those blanks so you can be more educated?
That kind of joke, I know enough to get myself in trouble, not enough to actually explain anything.
Yeah.
I go ahead.
I try to keep in mind, and maybe this is a result of my lab work, every measurement has a margin of error.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, whether it's a survey, whether you ask 12 people to count the number of forks on a table. I mean, every measurement has error. And I try to keep that in mind too, is what I'm coming down with, the opinion I'm taking, is that kind of within the measurement error of the facts that I'm basing things on or not. And that keeps me more humble more times.
So the next question I'd like to ask is, do you actually seek out information, like do research to say, well, I believe this, but let me look into it? Or once you've set something, do you just kind of accept it and then wait to see if something comes along? So for example, gravity, I'm pretty sure it's okay. I'm not going to research that. But there are other things that I think I know this, but let me go look. Where is that line between, I know this, I don't have to think about it, gravity, and I know this, but let me do some more research? And how do you decide that?
Well, for me, if I have to give a professional opinion on something, and sometimes in my work I do, then I have to research it and I have to assess the quality of the information I'm dealing with. For social things, I have to be honest. I have my opinions on a variety of social topics, and until challenged, they just stay in my head. But then sometimes when the challenges, especially when they're coming from a family member, I think, well, why? Then I might re-examine. But I need an external stimulus in order to do that. I'll be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. Like, I think that I want to be more conscious of being able to do a little bit more research to be able to help navigate through a couple of different things. But I think I'm the same way. If I believe that I know something is correct, then I usually don't do too much more research to be able to validate my own thoughts. There's usually a trigger behind it of someone else saying like, well, like, have you thought about it this way? Or, that might not be right, where I definitely start diving into a little bit more education and research to make sure that my viewpoint was the right viewpoint as I lead forward.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about this, I think about like, what's the agenda behind the conversation, and what are the stakes? And I think that those two things can determine how right you need to be, right? So, and I don't think it's necessary to be right all the time. I think that, other people's conversations, you can have an exchange without changing each other's minds. That's called the conversation. And that's valuable from a human connection standpoint too, because I think part of it is just feeling heard, making the other person feel heard.
I love that point. The point that if it's life or death, yes, you need to be right. You need to make sure that you know what you're talking about. But if it's what color blue something is, it's not as important. And you can have a conversation that is, well, we can agree to disagree on that. It doesn't matter. And Yeah, how right do you have to be? How right does you? I love that. Thank you. Oh, twisted my brain. That's what quick hits are about. Thank you so much for doing that for me. God, it made me think. I love that. And that is our 10 minutes. So I'm going to cut us off there. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And I
Thank
look
you.
forward to doing it with each of you again very soon.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.